I never thought I'd say this, but Democrats now have a real path to the Senate majority. And that path runs through 6 states. There's a funny thing going on right now in politics. Prediction markets are getting more and more bullish on the idea of Democrats taking the Senate majority in the November midterm elections. Now, I'm not someone who places a huge amount of stock in prediction markets, and I don't actually want to get into a big thing about them. The accuracy of these things is a complex question, not to mention the ethics of people betting on things like death and destruction and war. But this still matters to me, because the prediction markets, all of their flaws aside, are basically as close to a measure of conventional establishment wisdom as anything. So their movement gives us a clear takeaway. Over the past year, control of the US Senate has gone from being seen as a total lock for Republicans to a jump ball. And it's not totally hard to see why. President Trump's approval rating, which for a while wasn't actually that bad in historical terms, has officially entered the capital B bad territory. The war in Iran is clearly partly driving this. Polls show Americans do not like it. But its biggest danger is that the war actually encapsulates and knits together all of the critiques of Trump in his second term. That he's breaking his campaign promises, that he's neglecting the economy for other things, and that he's not focused enough on the problems of working and middle-class people. Amid all of that, gas prices are up, inflation has ticked up, and job growth is stagnating. And it looks like that's really starting to have an impact. In March and April, major polling averages like Real Clear Politics and Silver Bulletin have found it at the lowest level of his second term so far, knocking on the 30s. That's really in the danger territory. So it's not hard to see how the Senate has come into play. And if it actually flipped, that would have enormous effects. To begin with, there would be the symbolism. Right now, Democrats are favored to take the House, but taking the Senate as well would change the whole ballgame. The House and the Senate have not flipped together in one election since 2006, the last time a Republican president was in his second term. Democrats being able to get both would be the kind of big rebuke to Trump that they really want, the kind they couldn't even get in 2018, when they won big in the House, but lost seats in the Senate. Then there's the policy implications. Democrats winning the Senate would allow them to shut down a lot more of Trump's presidency, especially judicial nominations, and that could matter for decades. Remember, had Democrats won the Senate in 2018, Biden, not Trump, would have replaced Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The whole Supreme Court would have been different, Roe v. Wade would still be around, and the list goes on and on. So this matters a lot. And ultimately, I think there are 3 main questions that will determine the Senate majority in November. But first, let's go through the 6 races I think are Democrats' path to a majority, starting with the most likely to flip. Remember, right now the Senate is split 53 to 47. And if it's split 50-50, Vice President J.D. Vance would break the tie and give Republicans the majority. So Democrats need to win 4 of these 6 to win the majority. Let's start with Tier 1, the must-wins: North Carolina and Maine. These are absolutely, totally have-to wins for Democrats, mainly because they're by far the most low-hanging fruit. They're the bluest states of any on the map. Maine has voted for Democrats for president for decades, and North Carolina has been a perpetual swing state. The Republicans have won it since 2012. North Carolina is, relatively speaking, kind of a sleepy race. Democrats haven't won a statewide federal election there since 2008. They've come up just short over and over again. But this time, they have their best shot. They recruited former Governor Roy Cooper, a popular, kind of moderate guy who won twice the same night Donald Trump won the state, while Republicans are running Michael Whatley, a former lobbyist and Trump aide who's never run for office before. Now, it's still a red-leaning state, but more and more people I talk to think it's becoming Democrats' easiest pickup. Maine is much more dramatic. DC Democrats recruited the incumbent governor, Janet Mills, but she's not proving to be the candidate a lot of them hoped for. She'd be the oldest freshman senator in US history, and polls now show she's losing the primary to a progressive challenger, Graham Plattner. Now, Plattner has his own issues, including offensive old Reddit posts, but polls show him consistently beating incumbent Senator Susan Collins. Collins, you might remember, is the last senator in the country who represents a state her party lost in 2024, 2020, and 2016. And polls show her more unpopular than ever. But she survived in 2020, even when all the polls showed her losing. So for me, I'm probably just gonna wait until like 9 p.m. on election night to draw any conclusions. So those are the must-wins. From there, things get a little bit murkier. Hey, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and subscribe to my newsletter at thelongrun.news. It's the best way to support us. Tier 2. Red territory moving left, Alaska and Texas. Look, if you understand one thing about the 2026 Senate map, it should be this. There is no way for Democrats to win the majority without winning over people who voted for Trump in 2024. But not all red states are created equal. Some have been steadily moving right for years, and some have been steadily moving left. And that's this tier. Red-leaning states where there has been at least some recent leftward movement. And because of how red these states are, different people are going to have different takes on which one is Democrats' best bet. I'm going with Alaska for a couple reasons. For starters, Democrats have a kind of perfect candidate. Former Congresswoman Mary Peltola, who has already won statewide twice as Alaska's at-large Congresswoman from 2022 until she barely lost in 2024. And she's kind of Democrats' platonic ideal in Alaska. Very pro-gun, but also pro-choice. Kind of culturally moderate, but also economically populist. And she's ethnically Native Alaskan. So there is a real potential that the Native Alaskan community, which represents about 15% of that state's population, could turn out in high numbers for her. There's also this. Alaska has been quietly moving left over the course of the 21st century. In fact, look at this analysis from the Center of Politics at UVA. 2024 was, relative to the country, the most democratic it has been in decades. Alaska could also be where a backlash to the Iran war could really be felt. It has a high military population, and it now has some of the highest gas prices in the country. Now, one thing working against Peltola is that incumbent Senator Dan Sullivan is not a far-right, super Trumpy Republican. He voted for stuff like the federal same-sex marriage law and Biden's infrastructure law. But right now, some polls actually show Peltola ahead. And if there were ever a time and a candidate Democrats could break through with in Alaska, it should be now and with her. Now to Texas. Texas is the one race on this map where Democrats got a really good candidate and Republicans, very likely, got a terrible one. Democrats nominated State Representative James Tallarico. You may have heard of him. His whole thing is blending Bernie rhetoric against billionaires with a good church boy vibe. Republicans seem likely to nominate Attorney General Ken Paxton, a hard-right figure who has more scandals than I can even name here. So that contrast is probably everything Democrats could have hoped for. Plus, there are two other things. From 2012 to 2020, Texas moved more than 10 points to the left, one of the biggest leftward movements of any state. Biden only lost it by about 5 points, the best performance for a Democrat there in 45 years. Now in 2024, Kamala Harris lost all of that progress, but there's a chance that that might have been a blip. And that could be especially true if one thing continues, which is really important to watch: Trump's slow meltdown with Latino voters. Polls show that he, and Republicans in general, have basically lost all of the ground they gained with Latinos in 2024. And if that really is true, and it continues, Texas is one place where it could have a huge impact. The one caveat: Texas is an enormous state. So pulling off an upset means mobilizing and flipping millions of people. Like, look at it this way. Trump won Alaska and Texas by almost the exact same margin, about 13 points. But in Alaska, that was a difference of 44,000 votes. In Texas, it was 1.5 million. So it's just a much taller mountain to climb, and Tallarico is still a little bit untested. And he has to battle with the long hangover of Biden's immigration record, which was very unpopular in Texas. Tier 3, the red states moving right: Ohio and Iowa. Remember, not all red states are the same. And unlike Alaska and Texas, which have a record of moving left in some recent elections, the states in this tier have been uniformly moving right. Both states have gotten more Republican in every cycle since 2008. Doesn't matter what Democrats do, these states have just moved away from them over and over and over again. So to me, I'm a little bit skeptical there's a real path here. But I'm going to put Ohio as slightly more likely to flip for one big reason. They have a great recruit there, former Senator Sherrod Brown. He won Senate elections there in 2006, 2012, and 2018 before finally losing in 2024. And he's still got a little bit of an independent brand there as a kind of old school union Democrat. In 2024, Brown overperformed Kamala Harris by 7.5 percentage points, but he still clearly lost. And he lost against a scandal-plagued carpetbagger with a ton of issues. This time around, he's running against a far more conventional Republican without any scandals, which leaves us with Iowa. Now, unlike Ohio, where Democrats won Senate races in 2012 and 2018, Iowa Democrats have not won a Senate election there since 2008, the night Barack Obama was first elected president. And it's a little hard to imagine that this is the year. They're still figuring out their primary, which is split between Josh Turek, a Paralympian and state representative, and Zach Walz, a more liberal state senator. Turek would probably have a better chance, but either way, Republicans have a good candidate of their own, Congresswoman Ashley Hinson, a young, telegenic former news anchor. But Iowa is also a farm-heavy state that has felt the pain from Trump's tariffs more than any other. And Democrats do have a really strong gubernatorial nominee, Rob Sand, who could boost their Senate candidate. Now, as a bonus, we do have two wild cards, Nebraska and Michigan. In Nebraska, there's a populist independent candidate running there, Dan Osborne, who's probably going to run as Democrats' de facto candidate. And if he won, he'd almost certainly caucus with Democrats. He's basically running on an economically progressive but culturally moderate platform. In 2024, he did the same thing and actually did really well. He overperformed Kamala Harris by double digits. Now this time that might be harder, but it's still something to keep an eye on. Michigan is in the must-hold category. It's the only open Democratic-held seat that's really vulnerable for them this year. They have a three-way primary to get through and a pretty good Republican nominee on the other side. So depending on who they nominate, this could be in play. But if the political environment is anywhere close to where it seems like it'll probably be, Democrats should be fine. Still, they need to hang on to this seat if they want any chance of winning the Senate. So that's the lay of the land right now. And the mechanics and individual circumstances of each state do matter, but they're largely determined by bigger, broader questions. And to me, there's three. Number one, will Democrats' overperformance matter? According to the elections analysis website The Down Ballot, Democrats have overperformed Harris in special elections during Trump's second term by about 12 points. Last time that happened, before the 2018 midterms, it ended up being really predictive of where the House results landed. Democrats won the House popular vote by about 9 points nationally, close to their special election overperformance. But it didn't really extend to the Senate results. So the question is, will Democrats' overperformance continue? And will it extend to Senate elections, not just House elections? Number two, will the races be dominoes or splinters? One thing that has traditionally been true in Senate races is that they act like dominoes. Even when a lot of them are really close going into Election Day, they all generally end up falling the same way. 2012, 2014, and 2022 are good examples of this. A bunch of super close races, the polls were tight all over, but one party ended up sweeping basically all of them. But that's become a bit less true in recent years. 2020 and 2024 especially saw the parties split a lot of the toss-up races. So a big question this year will be, will the domino theory come back? And if it does, who will it favor? And finally, number three, can Democrats finally actually break through the red wall? If you watched this show before, you know this already because we talk about it a lot, but right now Democrats have a huge Senate problem. There are 25 states that voted for Donald Trump 3 times in a row, 2016, 2020, and 2024. That's 50 Senate seats in hardcore Trump territory. And after the 2024 election, Republicans now hold all 50 of them. And Democrats are already punching above their weight in the purplest states. There are 6 states that flipped in 2020 or 2024, and Democrats have 10 of those 12 Senate seats. They're already close to maxed out. So Democrats need to figure out a way to win Senate elections in red states that voted for Trump. Even if it's just one this year, that could be crucial to putting them back in a position to win the Senate majority in 2028. And if there's a year they can finally break through that red wall, 2026 should be it. If they can't do it this year, it's not clear when they can. Let me know what you think about my rankings here, and make sure to hit subscribe and subscribe to my newsletter.